pronouncing it properly?
Yeah.
Vivian Roy. And we have Lorena Lourenco, who did Stitched, Maria Valdez, Vida, and last but not least, Victoria Brown, who's executive producer of Choices. Seeing you all, and I've really enjoyed all of your short films. So, all of you are telling important, impactful stories about underrepresented people. And underrepresented people of color, we should say, or just people of color, who have historically been overlooked in mainstream film, independent film. So I want to ask you, first and foremost, how important it is for each of you to tell those stories. So I'll start with you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I believe it's so important because not very many stories, first of all, it's a kind of a coming of age story. And there aren't many African American coming of age stories. And when they are made, Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, the ones that really stand out, they tend to be really traumatic and dramatic. And
about men.
And about men. So we felt the need to talk about some issues that were right at the forefront. And the timing was incredible. At the time when we finished filming, it was when Dobbs versus Jackson was overturned.
And your short is about pregnancy, teen pregnancy.
It's, I like to phrase it as 3 young women who talk about reproductive choices.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Hence the title, Choices.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Oh, mine is not on. There it is. Okay. So Maria, can you tell us a little bit about the importance to you of stories and also specifically maybe action films?
So my film Vida is a female-led action film. It's a Latino cast and one African-American actress in the film. It was very important for me to take up space in a place where we're not represented, where it's male-dominated, which is the action genre space. And it's important for several reasons. I wanted women to be seen as powerful. I want them to be seen as heroes of their own stories, and also not to be damsels in distress. Because we can only be what we can see. And I did a screening. Josefina Lopez, who's a writer of Real Women Have Curves, did a screening. And she invited a lot of her, actor kids, because she has a theater shop. And this one little girl, after she came to see my screening, she came and she just grabbed onto me and latched onto me and hugged me. She said, "I never thought I could do that. And now I know that I can." So that's the importance of it. It's when we see ourselves on the screen, it gives us license to be able to do things and see ourselves in that position. So
Absolutely. Lorena.
Yeah, I definitely.
I think maybe the little button here.
Hello. There we go. Okay, there we go. Just to echo what Maria said, I think it's very much, you can see the future for yourself that you see in others, and so I think it's that thing of, growing up in Brazil, I could not see a single, female director, so I didn't know that I could do this, and it was kind of broadening my horizons and seeing what other people were doing outside of Brazil that I was like, oh, there is a path here for me. And so I think stories have the power to do that. And similarly, immigrant women of color, when they're usually the center of a story or in a story, it's usually about their pain and their suffering, and we're just so exhausted of those immigration stories because there's just so much more of a plethora of stories that relate to that. And so it's very exciting to me to tell a story about immigration, about the diaspora, where it was about identity, where it was about, also getting to have fun, seeing a woman of color on screen, getting to make jokes, and it's not that common, sadly. And getting to throw blood on her and on everyone else, that doesn't happen either for us to play with the genre, with comedy. And so being able to explore it in that space was really important to me as well.
Great. Vivian.
And so, yeah, my film was made in 10 days through a filmmaking competition through the Vancouver Asian Film Festival. And so that happens every year because we realize that there aren't that many stories of BIPOC folk. And it's so hard within the industry to even get our stories out there. And so having a specific initiative that we can tell our stories. But in particular, because it's inspired by personal experiences of loss for me as a kid. I lost my dad to cancer when I was really young, and so it takes place in a hospice, and there are a bunch of like paper cranes. Those kind of stories I don't normally like ever see growing up. And growing up in that kind of 2007s kind of like time, we didn't talk about it as a society. We very much didn't talk about it within our BIPOC community as well. We, especially for kids, that we try to shy away those really difficult conversations for kids, and we do it out of care for sure. But then for me, because I was experiencing loss and nobody wanted to talk about it, and I didn't see it on screen, and so it was hard. And so having that conversation, bringing it to kids and students that were my age, to be like, how to support your peers in general, but also within the BIPOC community, be like, we gotta stand together and we gotta talk about these things, even though generationally, that's the word, that traditionally we just didn't talk about it. Our parents try to shy away from these things, but we just gotta, take important aspects like conversation. We gotta really talk about all these important issues and these representation, because we're growing up in North America, Canada and US, that representation piece, we all struggle with it.
I think it's so interesting that all of your films are about things that we normally don't see portrayed, whether it's coming of age stories, things that our parents shield you from, women in non-traditional kinds of roles. I think that's super interesting. When I was teaching a class on diversity in the media, one of the things that I would ask my students was, when was the first time you saw yourself portrayed on screen, whether TV or movies? And it was really interesting because, all the white boys would be like, I can't even remember. I've always seen myself on screen. And then the people of color in the room would say, wow. And then there were some that said, I don't think I've still seen myself. So I want to ask you guys that question. When did you first feel seen, or when did you first see someone that you could relate to, that you felt like you're seeing yourself?
Well, I really had to push back. I'm a little older.
You're not older than I am, so.
I don't know. Well, I remember seeing Julia as a child.
I did too.
And my parents made sure, especially my mom, hey, we're going to sit and watch this.
It was the first, Diane Carroll is the first Black woman to ever lead a show on TV.
Yeah, I think it was like the early 70s, maybe, 72. I was still I wasn't in school yet, but what I really remember and stays in my mind, Sanford and Son. We loved it, we watched it, we quoted it, and I still watch it.
Maria?
I didn't see myself on television growing up, and that's part of what fueled my passion to create stories, because I would gravitate to women with dark hair or African American stories, which were, kind of closely related. But I didn't see myself, and that's really what I want. Why I went into this business, because I wanted not only myself, but the generations and my nieces and nephews and children to be able to see themselves on screen and identify with the stories. And I still think that we lack that very much. I mean, there's so many studies out there. It's out of the 1,800 films that were made since 2017. 5 were directed by women. And so, but as evidenced by Barbie, there's such a hunger for these stories and such a hunger for female point of views, and America Ferrera's monologue has gone viral. So we're just hungry and passionate for those stories and our point of views. So I'm here for that.
I don't think I saw myself in media as a young person. I grew up in Brazil, and Brazil has a very limited representation of what they will show on television.
Does everybody look European?
Yeah, either people are European or like it's the extremes, right? It's either the ultra rich or the ultra poor. Like there's no understanding of the vast in between that is the majority of the country. And you know, they've tried to make strides in that so far, but you know, I didn't see myself anywhere. And so moving here with, you know, the additional kind of level of otherness of just, you know, being an immigrant, that I think also intensified because there were no immigrant stories that reflected the ones I experienced. And then very recently, the movie Problemista came out, directed by Julio Torres, which is incredible. I highly recommend. And I watched it at the LA Latino Film Festival. And it was a wild experience because it was the first time that someone on a screen mentioned the exact type of visa that I've been on. And it's the first time that I saw my experience represented, and he has a little maze that he kind of goes through to kind of visualize what it's like dealing with American immigration, which is painful, to say the least. And that movie ended on a very funny note, but I was laughing and crying, and I was just a sobbing mess at the very end of that movie. And it was extremely powerful to me, and that's all I've been searching for in television in America since I've gotten here.
So you just saw yourself.
Yeah, this year.
And so for me, it's like, I think I grew up watching a lot of Asian like soap dramas with my parents and my family, and so, but that was all from like Hong Kong and like Asia rather than kind of like an Asian Canadian like second generation experience. Honestly, that didn't really happen until more recently. I mean, there's Mulan as well. As a kid, I really, you know, you pick your favorite Disney princess and you're just like, I identify with that princess. And of course it was Mulan, not to be stereotypical. But then where it came in, that second generational immigrant story for us Asians is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like that, like it won an Oscar, like we were just cheering because finally we saw ourselves, because we have, I mean, that's really, something to clap about, because then...
Best Picture.
Best Picture, yeah. Because the thing is that, I am like Asian, but I'm also very much North American. And that blend is just so rare, and these stories have always kind of happened, but they're percolating a lot more. And so it's really exciting to see more of those stories in film festivals like this one, and hopefully to come as well.
Well, it's funny you talk about stereotypes, and that's something that I think we probably grew up around the same time, and my parents are from Mexico. I never saw myself, and then occasionally you see somebody like a hot-blooded Latina, like Sofia Vergara, and it's like, no, I don't, you see these awful stereotypes, so I don't want to identify with that, but what do you do? Well, and you also brought up film festivals, so that was my next question. What do you think the role of film festivals like this play for underrepresented voices, and how important is it to play film festivals like this? So anyone can jump in. We don't have, Maria.
I mean, it's huge. The fact that people were able to see my film and they could now see themselves on screen, and even just seeing my film on a big screen is a dream realized. It never gets old to see your film on a big screen. It's it's a dream realized every time I watch it. But just even being on this panel and talking about it and informing people and getting the word out that, you know, our voices matter and our stories matter, and showing our stories, and that even though they're like, you know, Latino films or, you know, Asian films or African American films, they're just stories. And I think we do a bad job of like pigeonholing our, you know, stories and saying, oh, this is a Latino film, and people feel excluded from that. And I encourage everyone to go out and see those films, because they're not Latino films. They're stories. Right. They're stories about people. They're stories about humanity. And it has nothing to do with who made it and who's on screen. I think they're still relatable. They're still powerful. And I encourage everybody to go check them out. Don't let that stop you.
I felt like Everything Everywhere All at Once was able to transcend that. It was just a story of a very, you know, everybody was a very specific character, well-developed character, not a stereotypical character, except maybe Jamie Lee Curtis's character, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, I mean, even for like independent filmmakers, like Daniel and Daniel, like they started out in the indie realm, and of course they went to film festivals for their films, and film festivals are such an important place to really foster those stories and that potential, that you have someone to believe in you, because Hollywood's not immediately going to be like, okay, make these underrepresented stories, here's the budget. They're still very like, is this what people want? But if they get that excitement from film festivals, that's where they're like, okay, we got to start funding these films. This is what people want to see. And so film festivals have a really important role to garner like that support, because then it's, you know, we only have so much in terms of our voices as like BIPOC community, but if like the entire country and like large communities are really asking for these stories, it's like, why aren't we seeing that in Hollywood? Then they start asking those questions.
Give studios FOMO.
Yeah, give them FOMO.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, I think festivals are very important, because I have to say I saw Stitched at a festival, and you guys have to see it. It's an amazing, funny film. And I just don't think I would have seen that anywhere else. We just don't get the exposure to other women directors and professionals in this field. So I think it's very important.
Great. Speaking of, I want to go on.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say, because you were talking about the pigeonholing thing, and we've had an issue with this film because Pratima sent me the script, and I was like, I relate so deeply to this. This is a lot of my immigrant experience, you know, but she's a South Asian actress and writer, and I'm a Latina director. And so whenever you send this to festivals or you send this to grants, people don't know what to do with us, because they're like, oh, you're not the same ethnicity. We don't know what box to put you in. We're not going to put you in a box.
You have to be the same. Yeah.
Yeah, literally. And I'm like, so you'd rather not represent a very diverse film because it doesn't fit one specific diversity box that you can check? That sounds like real strides. And so we've kind of been, you know, navigating that uphill battle for a really long time.
All the better. That is what diversity is about.
Exactly. And then you add the fact that, you know, it's a comedy, and it's also a play with genre, and people do not know what box to put us in, right? And so it's festivals like these that, like, you know, are giving us a platform and are putting us out there, that it's like, yes, you can be, you know, you can come from an underrepresented background and have a very unique, weird take on a dark comedy genre film, and, you know, there's an audience for that out there. And I think studios just need to get proven that there is an audience out there for it. You know, they really do sadly function out of FOMO.
Yeah. Did I read that it's going to be on HBO Max?
Stitched?
Yeah.
Oh my God, no, not that I know of. My last short is, so.
Or other film.
Yes.
All right. Well, maybe from. Yeah.
Yes, we're manifesting it. It's going to be on HBO Max. Call everyone you know on HBO.
Vivian, let's start with you. Because I wondered, as I watched, I was very moved by it, and I knew that because of your dedication, that it was about you losing your father at a young age.
Yeah.
Was it painful in a way, sort of going back to that, or was it cathartic? Was it healing?
I mean, absolutely. We had not to have spoilers, but we had a scene to like recreate his death. I mean, he's passed on, so it's not too much of a spoiler. It's part of the premise. But it was really difficult, but it was also very liberating. I think because we also had like 80% Asian cast and crew and 90% like BIPOC cast and crew. And so it was like we were a community kind of mourning together, tackling this difficult topic together, which is something that I did in isolation as a kid. And to have that experience where like people aren't just looking at me, like it's like, oh, you're a little sensitive butterfly and we need to heal you. That is just like, no, you have the voice. We want to listen. We want to see how we can keep bringing these stories. Yeah. And so I'm really grateful for the cast and crew that helped bring my story to life, because yeah, that was the first time I was on a film set, so that was wild.
This is your debut film.
Yeah, it was my debut
Wow.
film. Yeah.
Congratulations. So I saw that you're one of 15 selected science filmmakers to work on the CBC show The Nature of Things.
It was a workshop program, and so we were able to get training, and so coming together with people in BC and Yukon to be like, hey, we're so underrepresented in this field of science documentaries, because I have a science background, and so and for us to have that space to be like, okay, come up with like stories, yeah, it's really neat.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Well, I saw that a few of you were kind of involved in workshops or filmmakers labs or those kinds of things. Can you talk about sort of the value of that in what you do?
I'll start that because I think there's generally a reticence to bet on artists, especially artists of underrepresented communities. And, going through a workshop or a lab, I think is a stamp of approval, someone that we trust, believes in your work and thinks there's value there. So I think that serves that purpose and that's very helpful. And a lot of these workshops actually do have really helpful, I think, tools to kind of develop story and develop career, which is extremely helpful. And the part that I like the most is the community building that comes from it and the different directors and writers and producers that you meet at it. But it also gets to a point where, if you don't have one of these badges or, these communities become very exclusive and it's like you got to know someone to get in, to get accepted. It's a very hard ceiling to break through and, they can be extremely helpful, but it gets to a point that it can also be a little harmful because, people just aren't willing to bet on new voices. And if you don't get that stamp of approval that a lot of the times you can only get when you know someone giving the stamp of approval, it's like, what comes before, the chicken or the egg, right? And so I think it becomes very program specific as well.
But then I saw that is this where you've been workshopping Sula and I with Diane Guerrero?
Yeah, so that one.
Sonic series?
Yeah, that one was through the Orchard Project, which I really love them because I think they really have a focus on stories and they do a blind read on all of the things that they receive. And so it's very much like they pick the stories that they believe in, which is really exciting. And so workshopping through them has been a very exciting opportunity because they're not only betting on your story, but they're betting on you as an artist. So if they like you and they like your story, they're going to champion you through all of the past that they have. And so it isn't flashy, it isn't Sundance.